Well, hello, and welcome back to that thing we like to call Curless Mania. It's probably lurking in your for your pleasure somewhere on your YouTube home channel, we hope, right? But we talk all things pop rock and prog here, and I am very, before I say anything else, I'm very happy to welcome back to the channel. I think this might be your third appearance, possibly.
Fifth.
Is this fifth? Holy moly, fifth appearance for Davey Cretin. How are you, Davey?
Excellent. Thank you for having me back, Tom.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And it's even more fun when we're talking about the cars, and we are digging into our series on the cars album by album. I mean, it wasn't enough to rank them. We want to talk about every album in detail. That's how big a fan we are.
Yes,
So I like to call this one the second album, not a sophomore slump.
correct.
Would you agree with that title?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
So
Grant, our buddy Grant Arthur from Grant's Rock Warehouse and a contrarian like you are, has mentioned that the first two albums are almost mirror images of each other.
yes,
And I
I
would
like
agree with that assessment.
couldn't agree more. I call them the Twin Towers is what I like to call it. It's like they're both just as good as the other. I mean, it's kind of like it reminds me of I always bring up Toys in the Attic and Rocks are kind of like that. It's like just they're both amazing.
Yep.
And we of course we're here to talk about Candio, which is the second record by the Cars. And it was released the second album from them on Elektra. It was released on June 2nd, 1979. Again, produced by Roy Thomas Baker, so same production team. And we were talking about this before we hit record, but Elektra actually wanted them to wait to put this record out because the first album was selling like gangbusters. It was going nuts, and it was still selling, a year into the release. And so, as any kind of record company is going to say, they're going to say, "Well, the first album's still going. Don't do anything yet. It's still selling, so just hold off." And Rick Ocasek, was like, "No, we're not going to stop. We're not going to hold off. We're rolling. We're not going to stop, and we're not going to hold back." So I thought that was really interesting.
And
Uh,
his famous, if I could interject, his famous quote was, if you hold the album back, you're holding us back as artists.
yes, yes. And I can see that once you have some momentum and you're going, you don't really want to stop. Like, okay, stop because you're doing too well. Like, it's like,
And Rick loved the studio. He was always a studio cat. He was
yeah.
never much for performing live. He did it, but I think it was more of a necessity to him. And he just loved writing songs and recording in the studio.
Yeah, you can tell. You can tell because on stage, I mean, he does the job, but he doesn't seem like he's. I mean, I could see him being much more animated in the studio and being
Yeah.
super excited.
I'll be
He loved creating, right?
I'll be
Yeah.
talking more about that in a future episode when we do the album that I saw them live for many, many years ago.
Okay, awesome. Well, stay tuned. This is going to be a long series. Um, so this is an album primarily made up of like 30 or 40 songs that they had from playing live for years. They had this huge cachet of songs, and really the first album was just a little slice of what they had. Um, and they did write some new stuff, and I'm sure Davey will jump into this a little bit too, but they did write a few new songs for the album. I don't know how many. I'm not sure exactly how many were new, but there were definitely some new songs. Um, they didn't lose any leftovers from what I understand from the first record that they did demo, like the ones we talked about earlier on the deluxe version of the first record. Um, and Take What You Want was kind of a big live song for them. I guess they played it in the encore or whatever. People used to go nuts over that,
Yep.
but they decided, and it's a good song, but they decided not to pursue it. And what's interesting to me is that as a musician, I think what happens is when a song becomes a year or older, it's like that's like an old song. Like I don't, I'm kind of let's do some new stuff. You kind of it gets on the shelf for too long, and you're like, let's move on. Even if so. Anyway, um, so the singles were last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm handing it over to Davey. Is the singles were "Let's Go," It's All I Can Do was the second single, and the third single was Double Life.
Yep.
So those were the three singles released from the record.
Okay, and the cover of the album was done by a famous pinup artist by the name of Alberto Vargas. And he had retired. He was 83 years old. And his niece was such a fan of the Cars that she's the one that talked him out of retirement into painting an album cover from this photo. And David Robinson had done a photo shoot at where is it here? And I think it was a Ferrari dealership. And there was a model named Candy Moore, and he did a photo shoot. He gave the photos to Vargas, and that's how Vargas painted the album cover from Robinson's photos. And Candy Moore actually dated David Robinson for a little while. So if you turn the album over and look at the pictures of the guys, even as a young teenager, I knew that guy in the middle sucking the lollipop. The ladies loved that guy. And that is not David Robinson, the drummer. That is Ben Orr, the bass player. And as they would say in England, he was probably a king birder. He and David Robinson must have had a lot of ladies during the run of the Cars albums. The other guys were a little unusual looking. And when I was a young boy, I looked a lot like Greg Hawkes, the keyboard player, up in the top right corner of the screen with the glasses.
Right here.
And that bowl haircut, that's how I looked as a teenager. Maybe next time I'll bring a photo and show you guys.
Yeah.
So this record is shorter than the first album. It only clocks in at 36 and a half minutes. And
Yeah.
the third song Tom mentioned, the third single, which didn't chart at all, Double Life, wasn't even going to be on the album. Rick decided to do, the Cars are basically his band. And he wanted to make a more democratic album this time. So everyone voted on his songs. And Double Life got the thumbs down. It was nixed from the record. But then it was such a short running time at only 32 minutes. And they realized it was what, like 13, 14 minutes shorter than the debut. So they put Double Life on the album to make it a 36 and a half minute record. And as Grant says, and we both agreed with him, this second album, Candy-O, is a mirror image of the self-titled debut, but this one has 11 songs. And the songs are shorter on this record. There's only one song that breaks the 4-minute mark, the last song, Dangerous Type. More on that after. Mm-hmm. And this was recorded in Cherokee Studios in Hollywood, California. Let's see, where was I? I lost my place. Sorry, my notes are a little out of order.
Okay.
Rick had Roy Thomas Baker. Rick thought that he was more minimalistic, I would say, the way Rick looked at things. And when he produced some unusual bands like Bad Brains and Suicide, later on Weezer, he took a more minimalist approach. And the Cars were more kitchen sink. You throw in everything, backing vocals, sounds, extra instruments, stuff very, very low in the mix that you could only hear if you have headphones on. And he told Roy Thomas Baker, for this album, let's strip back the vocals a little, the backing vocals, I should say. He didn't want the stacked Queen-like harmony vocals that were on the first album and every Queen album that Roy Thomas Baker did. So we had a chat with Baker, and Baker agreed, okay, we'll do a little less on the backing vocals. So they're not as stacked on this album as they were on the first album. It's more stripped down, a little more natural, and they could replicate it live better.
Yeah.
On this album, there are 4 Ben Orr lead vocals, 6 Rick Ocasek lead vocals, and 1 co-lead vocal, which is the second track, Since I Held You. They both sing on that one. Mm-hmm. Double Life, like I said, was supposed to be dropped, and they added it back on. It's still a short album. They probably could have even added the B-sides we're going to talk about later, but more on that later. Let's get into the actual songs here. And on my 2-CD Cars anthology, which Tom said he's going to pick up because there's a ton of unreleased songs, demos and B-sides, different versions of songs. There are 9 songs from this era on this album. So we had 6 out of 9 songs, and now it's like 9 out of 11 songs on here. So wow. The first 2 albums are big. And this album actually the first album sold 6 million copies in the States, certified 6 times platinum. This one is 4 times platinum, quadruple platinum in
Wow.
America. So
Wow.
it's a very, very big seller.
Would you say they
And
were riding the momentum of the first record still too, as well? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
In Australia, where our friends Peter Kerr and Bicycle Legs, aka Daniel, live, it went to number 7 on the Australian charts. Canada, up by our buddies Martin Popoff, Tim Derling, and Mike Ladano, went to number 4. In New Zealand, it was a number 6 album. Here, it went to number 3, so it did much better than the debut. And in the UK, it was number 30. Like I said, 6 songs on here, and there's a demo version of Night Spots, which is very minimalistic. It's just like keyboards and either a drum loop or a drum machine, some weird guitar. So definitely worth seeking out the demo version of Night Spots to listen
Nice.
to.
Nice.
Now, getting to the songs, as my pages are slightly out of order, sorry.
It's all right.
Starts off with Let's Go, which was the first single. This is sung by Ben Orr. It's a 3.5-minute pop rock song, and everything in this song is an earworm. It's super catchy. This was the 100th video played the first day of MTV back in 1981, and it just picks up right where the debut album left off. It's one of their biggest known songs. Hit number 14, which was at the time their highest charting single, because nothing from the debut album, believe it or not, cracked the top 20. But if you want more details on that, check out our first episode on the Cars, self-titled debut record. Little plug there. There's a nice chugging riff in this song and some great synth work from Greg Hawkes. And it's sort of like drum sounding hand claps. There are hand claps, maybe they're treated. It sounds more like a drum beat than an actual, like in John Cougar Mellencamp, Jack and Diane, those are real hand claps. But here it sounds more like a drum sound effect that's treated to sound like a hand clap.
Right.
But it's another catchy earworm, and you hear it, you remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is so memorable with almost every Cars song, and definitely Let's Go was the right song to pick for the first single. It hit number 6 in Australia, 5 in Canada, 40 in New Zealand, 51 in the UK, and like I said, number 14 here. Every instrument's a hook, and there's this almost subsonic. You have to hear it in headphones. It sounds like a beep beep, and it must be Greg Hawkes on the keyboard doing this doot 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 throughout the song. Mm-hmm. And it's another hook. And when you listen in headphones, earbuds, whatever you use nowadays, it's there and it's super catchy. The B-side of Let's Go is a song called That's It, which we're going to talk about at the end of the show. And this is an absolute headphone song, and it's a great first single, great track number 1. Going into track number 2, Since I Held You, has a dual vocal by Rick and Ben, Ocasek and Orr singing. It's a little over 3 minutes. It's a mid-tempo, it's almost ballad, but it's got some great guitar work from Elliot Easton. And I'm going to mention that, like I did on the first show, on almost every song. It's always about Elliot Easton's guitar solo. He's got these snaky riffs, excellent guitar solo. They make the song along with David Robinson, the drummer's catchy drum fills. And Tom and I were discussing this before the show started. I thought he's using some kind of effect where the drums almost sound like a lead instrument. They just come in like a thundering drum, and it's just this fill, and you hear it. And Tom, explain what you told me earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a production choice from Roy Thomas Baker. I think that they just had those toms mic'd very intensely, and they probably added some compression to it as well to really make it just very, very crisp. And it really just pops out of that mix. I mean, he has those things so cranked. And at times I was noticing it. It's funny that we were discussing it before we even started that sometimes the toms are the loudest thing in the mix. Crazy. But sometimes those fills are like hooks, like you're talking about the hooks. Sometimes
they're all hooks.
Like hooks, yeah.
And it's just super, super catchy. I think this is an odd choice for track 2 because Since I Held You is sort of a more mellow, mid-tempo song. It's got great outro fills, lead work from Elliot Easton. He just shines on this song. and the whole band does.
Hmm.
Moving on to track number 3, the second single from the album, It's All I Could Do, as Tom mentioned before. 3 minutes, 46 seconds, a lead vocal from Mr. Ben Orr. And I always loved the line, when I was crazy, I thought you were great. If you think about it, it's a negative. It's like you're negging the woman. You're saying, oh, you're great, but I was crazy when I thought you were great. So you're really not so great. It's
And I
just the
think
way.
I think a lot of people could relate to that lyric too, where it's like I was dating that person when I was a different person, you know?
And it's just the amazing lyrics that Rick Ocasek writes. There's no one who wrote these quirky, weird, odd songs and used such phrases and words like, what the heck is this guy talking about? But it makes you think and it's memorable, and the lyrics become another hook.
Yes,
So
exactly.
these songs are also hook laden and they rock. And like I said in the last episode, they're loved by the rockers, by the new wavers, by pop people. Just everyone loved the Cars. It's the one band that united rock and roll fandom back in the late 70s and early 80s. So getting back to It's All I Can Do, where was I? Hawks, I love that vocal line, when I was crazy, I thought you were great. Great lyrics. Hawk's synth line in this song and Ben Orr's vocals on the chorus is super catchy ear candy, while Elliot Easton riffs away on the verses. He's got some nice guitar lines on the verses. His guitar solo here, super, super hooky. You could either hum along to it, you could whistle to it if you're a great whistler. Reached number 17 in Canada. Oddly enough, it only reached number 41 here, but this was played on rock radio. I remember back in the day, because you used to be from Jersey. You're from Jersey, Tom.
Yeah.
So we listened to the same stations growing up, even though I'm a couple of years older than you. NEW, PLJ back in the day, they played about half a dozen songs from this album, and It's All I Could Do was definitely one of them. I remember hearing it on the radio. So while it wasn't big on top 40 AM radio, it was definitely played on FM radio, just like Let's Go. And I'll try to highlight the other songs I heard. Most of them are on side 2 from this album. This song was in the movie The Wedding Singer, but oddly enough, it wasn't on the original soundtrack to The Wedding Singer. They put it on volume 2. I think it was called More Songs from the Wedding Singer, or Wedding Singer 2, whatever it was called. And this song was covered by the band The Bravery. So It's All I Could Do was another really good song in the Cars canon. Next song is Double Life, like you mentioned. It was the third single from the album, sung by Ocasek, little over 4 minutes long. So actually, there are 2 songs over 4 minutes. I made a mistake before. Sorry. Even the great ones make mistakes, but oops. And this was the song that almost didn't make the album. They probably added it because the running time was just so short. And they said, hey, we got to have some more songs on this record. Add a song, boost up the running time of the album. This is another mid-tempo song, and it's got really catchy backing vocals on here. That's what I noticed. Great backing vocals on Double Life. Some great ahas, great ones on here. And this was on the first day of MTV, August 1st, 1981. This was the 21st video played. So they filmed a video for it, even though it didn't chart on the Billboard singles chart. Great guitar burst solo from Elliot Easton on this song. And then Double Life sort of crossfades and segues into the next song, which is definitely experimental. And it's Rick Ocasek at his most experimental. 1:41 seconds, called Shooby Doo. And this is very minimalistic. It's like an avant-garde song. It's in the vein of Suicide or even maybe Laurie Anderson, because it has these strange keyboard sounds. It's very eerie. It's got this drum loop, drum machine going on, some weird guitar bursts, very low in the mix. But it's weird, it's eerie, and I just love it. I think Shooby Doo is great. And then it goes right into the last song on side 1, which is the title track, Candy-O, 2.5 minutes long. Thing about Candy-O, the title track, it's more of a rock song than a new wave song, because Easton's exquisite guitar work stands out here. One of his best guitar solos is on this song, and he does some almost tapping like Eddie Van Halen on here. And Orr's vocal on the song is at the lowest part of his register. The way Candio, I need you. His voice sounds great on this song. It's so different. I love it. Different song. The song was oddly enough covered by the Melvins of all bands. The sludge rock band, the Melvins, covered this song.
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
So go figure. And
Interesting.
also the New Cars, which we will talk about in a future episode, they covered this too. I saw them do it live, but more on that in a later episode.
Okay.
So Candio is the title track. It ends side one in fine style. And that is side one of Candio.
Absolutely. No, that's I am, you know, I'm gonna jump in on side one. Let's Go. What an amazing single. As you said, just ear hooks, worms, earworms all over it. I still to this day, it's funny. I've heard some people say they don't love "Let's Go." I'm like, what? I think "Let's Go" is an awesome single, and up to anything on the first record, in my opinion. I just think
Yes.
Ben Orr's vocal is so great, and just that whole hook of "I like the nightlife, baby." Ba-na-na-na. She said, "Choo, choo, 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 choo. Let's go." I mean, that is so. I mean, I wish I would have written that. It's like anybody would, and worth their salt, would be like, I wish I wrote that. So catchy. Since I Held You, beautiful, very melodic, like you said, almost ballad-esque, almost, but it's the Cars, so it's not quite a ballad.
Right.
Um, but beautiful and melodic. Love that track. All I Can Do is another sort of melodic pop song. It's kind of the poppy side of the Cars. And what's interesting, and you hit on this, Double Life and Shooby Doo are kind of, you get little hints of where Rick wants to go next on this record. And these are the two songs in particular for me, Double Life and Shooby Doo, where you're like, oh, he's going in an artier, darker direction and some of this on some of these songs. And I think that's why Double Life, the rest of the band was like, well, maybe, and it's like a drum machine and it's not a full band song. And but I do like Double Life quite a bit, actually. I do like that song. Like you said, it kind of slowly builds. It's kind of a longer song and it kind of slowly builds. Um, and I love that. And then Shooby Doo has like you know, kind of a strange, I mean, I don't know, there's all sound effects and there's like vocoded vocals and don't you tell me what to do. He's doing all the whole, and then when he goes, "Just tell me what you tell me what you tell me," but bang, and it goes right into Candio. It's like, oh, I still, that moment when I put this on, when I first bought, this is one of the first albums I ever bought as a 10 year, I was
Wow.
10 years old. I bought this at Scotty's in Summit, New Jersey, and I was so excited to listen to it. And when that kicked into Candio, I was like in heaven, and I still am. I still love that moment. And you're right, Candio just kicks butt. I mean, it's a rocker. It's a full-on rock song.
It's like a hard rock song almost.
Yeah, and like you said, God, I mean, like you said, I can't say enough about Elliot Easton when he during that solo on that track is, and you're like, oh my God, he's just killing it. So, like you said, ends side one in fine form with Candio. I love that track. So, let's head to side two.
One thing I forgot to say about Rick's vocals on Shooby Doo, there's a lot of echo on
Yeah, yeah,
it. And then he hits these little notes at the end of each phrase where he just goes up. There's
yes,
like a
yeah.
little a
Your
yelp,
car. Yeah, yeah, right.
and just the echoing. It just makes it so bizarre.
Don't you
But it's
tell me what to do.
and you go, "Won't you tell me what to do?" And he does that
Yes,
little
yeah.
yelpy thing, which is great. Another catchy hook.
Yeah, they have a lot of, there's I always say there's a little bit of 50s in the Cars, right? There's like that the hiccupy vocals and they've just got little, sometimes you go, it sounds like a 50s song almost,
That's a good point. I didn't
you
even
know?
think of that.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Excellent
kinds,
point.
certain points, certain songs. Anyway, but let's start out with Night Spots. What do you think of that?
Love that song. It's one of my favorites, probably my second favorite song on here, a little over 3 minutes. And I always thought it was a longer song, which we discussed on the first album. I
Mhm.
thought all these songs were 5.5 minutes long, and most of them are under 4 minutes. I always thought this was a 4 or 5 minute song of 3:14. Rick
Yeah.
sings this. It's one of my favorites. Greg Hawk's quirky keyboards and Easton's riff-tastic guitar work make this song for me. It's an upbeat rocker. And also I wrote on here, Elliot Easton unleashes his inner Eddie Van Halen on the solo because he's doing like some finger tapping and some fast runs on the solo. It's a great solo. Another really hard rocking song that's
Yeah.
almost considered hard, not heavy metal at all, but hard rock. It's almost up there with your Van Halen.
Yeah, they're
from this
flirting with hard
period.
rock. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And Ben Orr, who's I think an underrated bass player, he adds some nice sublime bass playing to the song that complements the song. And you got to really listen carefully to hear him, that he just bubbles up in the mix for a second. Oh, another hook. Very cool. Mm-hmm. And I love when Ocasek sings, you keep, let me get this right. You keep on messing with your blonde long hair. Yeah. Love that line. I always love that line. My favorite line in the song here. And then he does this little yelp. Oh, another catchy hook. And I'm just waiting for it. Yeah, he did it. Awesome. Yeah. And then Greg Hawkes at the end of the song brings in the vocoder where he keeps repeating, it's just an automatic line. It's just an automatic. And then the keyboard's under it. Down, sounds so good. Yep. And my friend that used to work with Josh at the record store used to call that the ELO robot because I played the album Time a lot where they're using the vocoder. So he said, oh, there's the ELO robot on the guesting on the Cars album. So I think he uses it to fine effect at the end of the song. And Night Spots is just an awesome song. At the end of my notes, it just says awesome with 2 exclamation marks.
Same here. My notes have the same thing. Amazing. Love it.
And then it goes into You Can't Hold On Too Long, which is, I think, the only song on side 2. That features Ben Orr on lead vocals. It's a little under 3 minutes, and he's using that deep part of his voice again. And David Robinson's drumming again, right here, I wrote down. It's Ben Orr's voice and David Robinson's drumming that highlight this song for me. And Elliot Easton's slight string scrape at the beginning of the song is really good. And he repeats it again. And Greg Hawkes is more of a supporter on this song. He has some nice, like, minimalistic, low-key keyboard work. Another Elliot Easton stinging guitar solo towards the end of the song. And some of the rhythm guitar work on this song, to me, recalls My Best Friend's Girl. It's got that jangly 60s sound on You Can't Hold On Too Long a little. And you hear it in different bursts during the song. Like when it calms down at the beginning and then right before the end. Just say, oh, that sounds like the first album.
Oh, that's a great point. I never thought of that. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Thanks. Next song, track 9, is I call it an odd tale of young love, Lust for Kicks, at just under 4 minutes. And only Rick Ocasek would start a song off with a line, he's got his plastic sneakers, she's got her Roebuck purse, which is a reference, anyone our age knows, to Sears and Roebuck Company. Mm-hmm. And Sears just, I think, recently went out of business in the last 10 years or so, or they're really downsizing all their stores. I haven't been to Sears in a very, very long time. But only Rick would start a song with that couplet. And there's some great catchy keyboard work from Hawkes in this song, including some plinking piano towards the end of the last chorus, right before the ending vamp. Just he does these nice piano notes, dun, 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 dun. And it's probably an electric piano he's using. He never really played a grand piano or anything like that. So Lust for Kicks is a good deep track. And I definitely heard this one on the radio back in the day. Mm-hmm. Which leads into the garage rocker with vocals by Rick Ocasek, just like on Lust for Kicks. Just a hair under 3 minutes, got a lot on my head. Definitely played on rock radio. Oh, for sure. Because this is like a throwback to almost a nugget, like a psychedelic nugget type song. It's got that Farfisa. I don't know if he's playing a real Farfisa. It's probably a modern keyboard at the time in '79. It's got the Farfisa organ sound from Hawkes. And some great, I wrote stinging 6-string fretwork from Elliot Easton. Another fine Easton guitar solo on the song, and really cool backing vocals on Got a Lot on My Head. and it's catchy. It's got those woo-woos, the backing vocals. Woo.
Woo! Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let the real singer sing it. And of course, that leads into my favorite track, the last song on the album, just like with the debut, All Mixed Up ended the album, where that's the only song that could end the album. It's a great album ender. And Dangerous Type, the Dangerous Type, technically, 4.5 minutes long, the longest song on the record, ends this song. Rick Ocasek vocals. He's got some weird turns of phrase, of course, with the lyrics. Everyone stands out on this track to me, especially over the ending vamp. And you've got David Robinson's drums again. Just those fills he does, and they're just right at the top of the mix.
Yeah.
And they're great. And you always want to add drum along. I always think that Rush is the biggest band that I always wanted that I add drum along to. And the Cars are right there in his first few albums where you just want to do these drum fills that David Robinson does.
You're waiting for those fills. Yeah. Yeah.
And just listening to this stuff again, he was a really good drummer.
He
And
was.
later on, when they replaced him with drum machines, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm going to pull back there a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting back to the song, the main guitar riff, it's been stated, and I never really thought about this, that it recalls T-Rex's Bang a Gong, the intro. Bow, now, now, bow, 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 bow. And I
Yeah.
never realized that.
That's very Bang a Gong. That's your, yeah. That's interesting.
Let's see. This song was covered by Letters to Cleo from the great 90s film, the cult classic, The Craft,
Okay.
about the witches in the coven back in the day. And this was a cult movie. And all the artists on the soundtrack to The Craft, female lead vocalists to match all the female leads in the movie.
Okay.
So they covered this song, and they do a really good version. So if you're a big fan of the Dangerous Type, check out Letters to Cleo cover song of it. It's a really good soundtrack too. I used to play that a lot in the record store at the time. And I wrote during my record store days, and I spelled the D-A-Z-E on perfect, because working in a record store, you were often in a daze from dealing with some of the people you have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But getting back to the song, this is definitely a top tier tune for the Cars. It's up there in my favorite Cars songs of all time, highlighted by Elliot Easton's guitar solo, David Robinson's drums, Greg Hawk's great synth line, and those chiming celestial keyboard sounds that end the song, where it almost sounds like bells, but it's some kind of chiming keyboard effect that he's using. And this is the perfect way to end this album. Amazing song, The Dangerous Type, track 11, the last song on side 2.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what hits me about this record is the first and last song of each side are just absolute killers.
And Night Spot. Yeah, Night Spots.
Night Spot. Let's
And
go.
yeah, on
Night
both.
Spots. Dangerous Types. Like lights out.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, absolutely love Night Spots. I think it's a great way to start side 2. I always wait for the pick slide, when it's
Yeah.
yeah, just when it kicks in, down, 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 ding, 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 ding. It's like, oh yeah, it's like yes, it's so great. The whole band kicks in. Really, really cool song. Love Night Spots, and apparently Night Spots was, I don't know if it was recorded for the first or it was
That
considered.
was actually the only song that was a holdover. Every other song is new on this album except Night Spots.
So that's the only one that was recorded or considered for the first record.
Yeah. And the demo version is on here, where it's very minimalistic and it sounds almost like Shooby Doo. It's in that vein, that experimental vein. So check it out. It's one of the great songs on the 2 CD anthology, Just What I Needed.
Yeah, I'll be owning that soon. I can't believe, I was telling Davey, I said, can't believe I don't own that. What kind of fan do I call myself? I don't own that. But anyway.
I think it's been out of print for decades. It's not even on Spotify.
No, it's not. Yeah, I didn't see it on like any kind of, like, I think I have Apple Music. I didn't see it on Apple Music.
Yeah,
but
so it's not on the streaming services.
They do have the deluxe versions though, so I can get some of the stuff on the deluxe versions, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, But yeah, back to the record. So Night Spot's absolute killer. You Can't Hold On Too Long. I forgot how much I like that song. It's just a great Ben Orr vocal. And another thing I noticed is that Ben Orr is a little more, as you pointed out, Ben Orr is a little more dominant on the vocals on side one. And Rick is more dominant on side two.
Yes.
Um, and then Lust for Kicks is this is the one that I kind of thought sounded almost like early 60s or 50s ish with that, it
Yeah.
sounds very like early 60s or something, like you said, with the Farfisa sound and everything. Um, but it's a cool track. And again, Lust for Kicks also kind of gives you a little hint on the next phase of the next album. So and Got a Lot on My Head is just a full out rocker. Great, as you said, great Elliot Easton work. And then
Oh yeah.
Dangerous Type. What can be said? You've already said most all of it. I mean, Dangerous Type is a killer.
I forgot one thing. That was definitely played on rock radio and still is.
Oh yeah, Dangerous Type for sure. I remember hearing that.
Huge.
Yeah. And I love the lyrics. We were talking about the lyrics earlier. I mean, Geranium Lover, I'm live on your wire. I
Yep.
mean, and
What is that?
and he says something about what does he say? He says something about I want to break your crossword smile, which is I got to do a little plug. One of my band is called Crossword Smiles, and that's from Dangerous Type. So there you go.
Nice.
So but yeah. So anyway, little selfless plug there. But anyway, that's the record, and I think that it's absolutely killer. And let's get into some of the B-sides, the extras. That's It, I think it was the first B-side I heard.
It's 3 minutes, 20 seconds long with a lead vocal by Mr. Benjamin Orr again. And I
Yeah.
love Elliot Easton's snaky guitar lead intro into the song. Just he has some great guitar work on this song. Orr has very icy vocals. He sounds almost as detached as Rick Ocasek does on a lot of his songs. Like
Yeah.
he's describing something he's seeing
Hmm.
that's not there. I'm an outsider looking into this situation, so I'm not involved in this situation. And this is what I think of it. He just
Yeah.
sounds very detached. And
Hmm.
this is definitely an underrated gem in the Cars catalog. Really good backing vocals on this song too. And it's worth it just to hear Elliot Easton's great lead guitar work on here. So definitely check out That's It.
And
I
it's a
highly
full-on
recommend that.
song that was recorded during Candio sessions, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
so.
and it was only available until it was on this CD. It was only the B side on the vinyl 45 of Let's Go, the first single.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was another song that was from this time period, and they released the demo on here also called Slip Away. And this is Rick Ocasek singing. It's 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And listening to it again, it reminds me of the song, one of the few studio songs that the New Cars did, which was a later incarnation of the Cars. It had on keyboards Greg Hawkes, on guitar Elliot Easton, on lead vocals and rhythm guitar Todd Rundgren, of all people. Kasim Sultan was bass and vocals, and Prairie Prince was the drummer. And they went out as the New Cars. I saw them live, which I'll get to in a future episode. I saw them on tour with Blondie, of all bands. And they had a new song at the time called But Not Tonight. And this song sounds very reminiscent of that song to me. So I looked up the songwriting credits on it, and Slip Away was written by Rick Ocasek. But if you play the songs back to back, they sound eerily similar, very similar.
Hmm.
I couldn't believe how reminiscent it was of that song. Now, Slip Away, because the Cars didn't use it, they never officially released it till it appeared on the 2 CD greatest hits. It was given to Ian Lloyd, singer-songwriter, and he was in the band Stories, which had a big hit back in the early 70s. And also this guy, Ian Lloyd, he sang background vocals on, I think, all 9 of the Foreigner studio records. Ian
Oh,
Lloyd is a background vocalist.
all right.
Because I'm currently working on a Foreigner album ranking for my channel because they're about to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's
And
right.
looking at the credits, every album, Ian Lloyd backing vocals.
I'll have to check that out. Huh.
And on Ian Lloyd's version of Slip Away, Ben Orr and Rick Ocasek sing backing vocals. So there is the big Cars connection right there. So
Nice.
those are the two unreleased. Well, it was a B-side of a 45. That's it. But these are the two songs that were not on the original 11-track album at the time of release, and they're
Yes,
both worth checking out.
absolutely. So it's interesting that it sounds like Rick was really pushing for Double Life to be on the album. Because you wonder if That's It was in contention before that. I don't know. I guess I mean, who knows? But
I like That's It better, but Double Life is good.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
don't
I
think
love the. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think with the original six, I think it's six studio albums on Elektra. I don't think there's a bad track. I don't think there's a bad album. I love them all. It wasn't until they reformed without Ben Orr that, well, we'll get to that later on. But I
Yeah.
always think every Cars song has something worthwhile, whether it's the keyboards, the vocal, Elliot Easton's guitar work. But I
Yes.
really like every song from every album. There are just some songs that pop and stand out, like Dangerous Type and Let's Go
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Candio, the title track. And of course, Night Spots. The song flew out of my head for a second. That Night Spots, great song.
Yeah, Night Spots. I mean, it's interesting that Double Life was a single. That's the thing. That's what I don't get. I like Double Life, but I don't hear it as a single at all. Like that's a weird single choice.
I
Um,
agree.
that's especially since they've got Candio, Night Spots, and Dangerous Type. I mean, that's I'm like going, you're gonna pick that over those three songs. I mean, so it's a little interesting, but um,
There could always be also behind the scenes with the record company. Maybe the record company said, "Oh, Dangerous Type, that's a single, but it's too long at 4.5 minutes. We're going to chop a minute of it out." And Rick may have said, "Yeah, you're not cutting down my song like that to release it as a single." There's always the possibility something like that happened.
yeah, I could hear him saying that too. Like, absolutely not. No, we're not doing that.
You're not chopping up my song. That's the last song. It's the last song for a reason. I want it there, and you're not touching it.
Yeah.
So maybe it's because of that. I mean, I was just on, speaking of shameless plugs, I just appeared on Peter Kerr's channel, Rock Daydream Nation. And we
Hmm.
just did a show on record company interference. We did an episode on MCA, and we're going to be doing another one in a month or so on a different record label, and how the record labels interfered and some of the bands and their album releases sort of went down the drain and tanked when they should have done a lot better for
Yeah.
multiple reasons. So check out that show on Rock Daydream Nation, Peter Kerr's channel, our buddy in Australia, and we talk more about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wasn't I'm gonna check that out because I did see that that came up because I subscribed to Peter's channel and I think I saw that came up and it said something about was MCA the worst label in the 80s or something like
That's
that.
it. That's the
And
show. And we're going to be
I
tackling another one
that's great
soon.
because didn't they call it MCA Music Cemetery of America or something like that? It was like
See, and Peter heard me say that on the shows I've been on other channels. I've mentioned how MCA, I've done a bunch of shows on Kansas, and how MCA killed those two albums, especially in the spirit of things, and Power, their 80s albums, by not promoting them right, by not releasing the right songs, not making videos for singles and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And I said Music Cemetery of America, and that's what we used to call it back in the day in the record stores. And then in the show, I go into explaining the history and where that phrase actually came from. And just it made its way down to the record shops, and we were calling MCA the Music Cemetery of America.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Well, maybe I can put like a link to that video down below. I'll probably try to do that afterwards. So,
It's
um,
a cool show, and it's doing really well for Peter's channel. He's gotten
yeah.
a lot of eyes on it.
Yep. 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 Absolutely. So, so of course, if you haven't already, you I always have to mention before I forget that please check out Cretin Classics as well, which is Davey's channel. He does a lot of great content on his channel as well. Uh,
Thanks.
so if you're not familiar, got to familiarize yourself like ASAP.
And my latest video I just put up with my producer and better half, Tia, we ranked the studio albums of the Police.
And it's a good one, folks. It's a good
Thanks.
video. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And you know what I enjoyed the most was she kept calling you David, which I was like, David. I'm like, it's Davey. It's not David. That
Well,
was
Davey
funny.
Cretin's my stage name.
Yeah, that's my stage name, man.
And
Um,
next year, the big reveal, my real last name will be revealed in 2025. More on that to come.
Ooh, that might be some clickbait, man. That might, that might you're gonna have to like you have to pre-hype that one and be like, I'm gonna it's like Kiss Unmasked. So the last thing I have to ask you, Davey, before we wrap up, because we got to wrap up here soon. Well, first thing I'm going to say is stay tuned for the next episode, which will be this record. So that'll be the next one we'll do at some point in the future, and I'm excited to do this because this is more of a controversial one,
Oh, definitely.
you know. Um, but um, but I want to know what Sammy Davis would say about Candio. I mean, what was his when Sammy was around when this came out in '79, right?
You know, Cat, one day I was backstage with these kooky, nutty cats, the Cars, man. And Rick Ocasek, man, he's like this tall dude, and he's got this big Adam's apple. And I said, you know, I just want to touch your Adam's apple, Rick, because I love you. I love you like a kid, and I mean that, man. Oh, yeah.
But Rick was no Frank. He's no Frank. No
I'm
chairman.
not, just one impression, man.
That's it. That's it. We'll do that. We'll end with that.
More
So that
next time.
it's great that Sammy Davis did meet the Cars. It's pretty cool. But anyway, thanks again, everyone. If you stuck with us this long, we appreciate it.
We're
And
getting
I
silly.
do
We're
think
getting
that's a great.
loopy.
I think that's an awesome impression. I love it. So,
Oh,
um,
thanks.
anyway, it's so if you stuck with us this long, we really appreciate it. Um, what do you guys think of Candio? Let us know in the comments. Let us what's your take? I mean, we think it's the Twin Towers with the first record, basically. What's your take? Do you think that it's a drop from the first record? Some people do. But I'm not of that opinion. Um, but we'd like to hear from you anyway. Everyone hears it differently, right? So thank you very much for watching. Davey, thank you for joining me as always. It's always a pleasure. And go check out his channel. And and thank you so much for hanging with us tonight. And go listen to some Cars today or tonight or whenever you're watching this. Go listen. And we will see you, and hit like and subscribe too. If you like this channel and you like what you see, hit like and subscribe. It always helps the channel. Have to say that. And we will see you next time on Curless Mania. See ya.
Bye.